The most basic idea of story structure is that your story has to have a beginning, some bits in the middle, and an end. Without these elements, you wouldn't really have a story. Now, given these basic pieces, a story can naturally be either more complex or less complex. There can be different styles of structure that explore character versus plot-driven stories or different incidents that happen on a character's journey. So here are some basic story structures that you can use when writing your novel. 1. Narrative structure. Within narrative structure, there are a few different types that you can use. One is linear or chronological structure, which is where a narrative is told in the order in which it occurs. This is one of the more common means of writing a story, but it's not the only way out there. You can also use non-linear or fractioned. It is not in chronological order. You are jumping through time. A circular structure is where the story ends, where it began, such as The Hobbit, where a journey begins at one point and then ends at the same point. Then there is parallel structure, where a story follows multiple storylines which are tied together through an event, a character, or a theme. And then there is the interactive story structure, which involves sort of a choose-your-own-adventure thing where readers can pick which way they want to go and endings and that sort of a thing. 2. Narrative arcs. Okay, these are the overarching things that happen in a story. The most basic is the one that you tend to learn in school and draw all of the diagrams for. The exposition with the rising action, followed by a climax, followed by falling action, followed by resolution. You can tweak this structure as much as you want. You can change things around. You can have the falling action be really, really small, or the rising action leap to the climax, and then the falling action kind of bridge most of the story. Another arc structure that you can use is the 3-act, 8-sequence structure. This involves going through 3 different acts, the beginning, the middle, and the end, and having different things that happen in each act. Act 1 is the beginning, with sequence 1, where the status quo and inciting incident happen. Sequence 2 is the predicament and the lock-in for the character, where they are set to go on this journey. And then you go into Act 2, which is the middle, and you have Sequence 3, where the first obstacle happens. Sequence 4 is the midpoint, and Sequence 5 is rising action. Sequence 6, then, is the biggest obstacle for the character. And then you have Act 3, or the end, or Sequence 7 is the twist, and Sequence 8 is the resolution. Now this 3-act structure is very similar to the most basic, but it expands on it. It changes things around a little bit, and it adds more incidents within the story itself. And then 3, emotional arcs. Now, emotional arcs focus more on character-driven stories as opposed to plot-driven stories. So the emotional arcs focus on a character's emotional state throughout the story, and you have different arcs within that itself. You have a positive growth, where a character grows emotionally and they are a better or more complicated person than they were at the beginning. A negative arc, or a tragic arc, where a character sort of descends into darkness or makes choices that can cause problems with their morality and the story itself. And then you have a static character arc, where a character stays true to themselves throughout the entire story, and you end up with a character who is much the same at the end as they were at the beginning, but a lot of the events that have happened have caused them to question things or to make certain choices, and yet they still manage to remain true to themselves. Now, given all of these different story structures, you have to take one more thing into account, and that is your writing style. So if you are a plotter, you may want to determine the style or structure that you're going to be using beforehand, and then outline using that structure. The outline can be done in many different ways. You can use note cards, you can use a word processing tool, you can write a 12,000 word document that goes through and is basically a very watered down version of your story. However, I am probably not the person to ask about this sort of a thing, because I am a dedicated discovery writer or pantser. I don't pick a story structure before I write it. I have no idea what form my novel is going to take. However, this does not mean that I never use structure. For me, this comes in during the editing process. I apply the structure then and make sure that my story is coherent and it flows properly. So whether you're an avid outliner or pantser, discovery writer, story structure can be a very useful tool to help figure out where you're going and what needs to be fixed in order for your story to make sense. By no means, though, are these all of the possible methods, nor are they absolute rules that need to be followed. You can absolutely go in and manipulate a structure. You can change the 3-act structure and have a 5-act structure. Be a Shakespeare. Go in and have a 1-act structure where everything happens in the same scene, like Alfred Hitchcock's The Rope, I think it was. Throw the rules out the window or use them. It doesn't matter. Whatever you do, these are tools that you can use to improve or to create a story and determine where you have ended up or where you need to go.